When she pulls away, it's not silence, it's a verdict. It cuts deeper than words ever could, because words give you a chance to argue, to explain, to defend yourself. But silence doesn't negotiate. Silence doesn't debate. Silence leaves you alone with your thoughts, forcing you to face the raw truth you've been avoiding. You tell yourself it. Temporary, that she's just busy, that maybe she'll come back around. But deep down, you feel it, the shift, the distance, the emptiness where her energy used to be. And that emptiness burns because it tells you what your pride refuses to admit. She no longer feels what she once did. And that truth hurts more than any insult she could throw in your face. You sit there replaying the last conversation, dissecting every word, every pause, every tone, hoping to find a hidden clue. But there is no clue. The silence itself is the answer. Her distance is not an accident. It is not random. It is deliberate, and it speaks volumes. You may not want to hear it, but her silence is telling you something about yourself. It is telling you about the weight, or the lack of it, that your presence carries in her world. When someone values you, they don't ignore you. When someone respects you, they don't disappear without explanation. And when someone loves you, silence feels impossible. If she can walk away without a word, if she can cut the thread of communication so cleanly, then the bond was already weaker than you allowed yourself to believe. You want to see her distance as cruelty, as if she owes you closure, as if she owes you an explanation to soothe your confusion. But the brutal truth is this: she does owe you anything. Her silence is not cruelty, it's honesty. The kind of honesty most people are too afraid to face. It's easier to hear words because words can be twisted, argued against, manipulated to fit the story you want to believe. But silence? Silence doesn't bend. Silence is a mirror. And when you look into that mirror, you see yourself, not the version you like to project, but the version that wasn't enough to hold her attention, to keep her invested, to make her stay. The mistake you make is thinking her distance is about her. It's not. It's about you. It's about the cracks in your foundation that you've been covering with excuses, with habits, with distraction. It's about the moments you grew comfortable, when you thought effort was optional, when you believed that showing up was the same as standing out. You confuse proximity with connection, and you confuse attention with love. That is why her silence cuts so deeply. It exposes the truth you've been hiding from yourself. You were there, yes, but were you unforgettable? Were you irreplaceable? Were you the man she could turn away from? Or were you simply convenient until she no longer felt the pull to stay? This is the harsh realization you keep running from. If she can ignore you, it's because your presence did demand to be remembered. If she can withdraw without hesitation, it's because you failed to create the kind of impact that makes someone fight to stay close. And instead of facing this, you distract yourself with false hope, convincing yourself she'll return, that silence is temporary. But silence does just happen. Silence is the echo of a decision that has already been made. So you are left with a choice. You can keep begging for words that will never come, clinging to the ghost of what used to be. Or you can face the verdict. You can accept the sting of being ignored, not as a death sentence, but as a wake-up call. Because until you understand that her silence is a reflection of your own weakness, you keep repeating the same cycle with different faces, different names, different situations. The pain will recycle itself until you decide to stop running from it and start rebuilding yourself. Her silence is not the end. It is not a wall designed to trap you. It is a signal that it's time to strip away the excuses, the comfort, the illusions, and see yourself clearly. Because only then can you become the kind of man whose presence cannot be ignored, whose silence speaks louder than words, and whose value does vanish when someone else walks away. Her distance isn't random. It never is. You tell yourself she just needs space. You convince yourself she is busy. You invent reasons that make you feel less rejected. But the truth is this: when someone pulls back, it is deliberate. People don't drift without cause. Energy does vanish without reason. Her silence is not a coincidence, it's a reflection of something she no longer feels. And while you scramble for answers, while you try to decode her behavior, she has already spoken louder than any words could. She does need to explain her silence, because her silence is the explanation. Every time you stare at your phone waiting for a reply, every time you replay the last moments in your head, you are missing the real message. The message is that she no longer feels urgency to engage with you. She doesn't see the importance in keeping that connection alive. That stings, but it's the raw truth. If your presence had weight, if your energy had impact, ignoring you would feel impossible. But when she creates distance, it means your presence was light enough to let go. That, the reality no one wants to face. You think love protects you from being ignored. You think history protects you from being replaced. You think effort from the past guarantees loyalty in the present. None of that is true. Relationships live in the now. And in this moment, she is showing you where you stand. Not with words, not with explanations, but with silence. You may think silence is unfair, but silence is actually the most honest answer you will ever get. Because silence does lie. Silence does sugarcoat. Silence does protect your feelings. It just is. It's easy to believe that if she's not speaking, it means she's still undecided. That maybe she's thinking, maybe she's processing, maybe she'll come back. That's the lie you tell yourself to avoid the pain of reality. Silence is not indecision. Silence is decision. The cleanest way to show you she has checked out. It doesn't matter whether she has someone else, or whether she is simply lost interest. What matters is that she is no longer investing in you. And when someone stops investing, you can bargain them back into it with words, apologies, or desperation. Here's the harsh truth you've been ignoring. Her silence is a measure of your influence. If she can distance herself without hesitation, it means you weren't unforgettable. If she can ignore you without guilt, it means your presence did carve deep enough into her life. That doesn't mean you worthless. It means you got comfortable. It means you stopped pushing yourself. It means you became predictable, easy, safe, maybe even invisible. And nothing kills desire faster than invisibility. This is why distance is so powerful. It exposes the reality you've been hiding from. You can't hide behind charm. You can't hide behind effort. You can't hide behind excuses. Distance strips away the illusion. It forces you to see that connection isn't about what you think you gave, it's about how she felt in your presence. If she feels nothing, she gives nothing. If she feels uninspired, she pulls away. And if she feels you've stopped being a man she can respect, she ignores you. Stop pretending you don't understand. You understand perfectly. You just don't like the answer. You don't like the reflection silence shows you. But if you keep resisting it, if you keep waiting for her to return and fill the void, you will stay stuck in the same pattern, needing someone else to validate your worth, instead of building the kind of worth that can be ignored. Her distance is a mirror, and it doesn't lie. You can choose to stare into it and complain about what you see, or you can face it, accept it, and let it fuel a transformation. Because once you realize her silence is random, you also realize your next move can be either. You think her ignoring you is cruel, but that, because you are blind to the deeper cruelty, the one you've inflicted on yourself. You've made her attention your oxygen. You've convinced yourself that her validation is proof of your worth. And when that validation disappears, you suffocate. But here is the truth you don't want to hear. No one should hold that kind of power over you. No one should decide if you feel strong, confident, or valuable. The real cruelty is not in her silence, it's in your dependence. You've built your sense of self on someone else, as recognition, and now you are paying the price. What you call cruelty is clarity. The stripping away of illusions. You confuse her attention with love, but attention is cheap. It costs nothing to answer a text, to throw you a smile, to give you crumbs of presents. Real connection goes deeper than attention. And you've been living off scraps, mistaking them for a feast. You wanted to believe that her presence meant security, but security does come from someone else, it comes from you. The second you started leaning on her to define your value, you set yourself up to be crushed when she pulled away. Listen closely. If she can ignore you, it is because you made yourself ignorable, harsh. Yes. True. Absolutely. People don't forget those who change their lives. People don't overlook those who bring undeniable energy, presence, and purpose into their world. You were consistent in showing up, but consistency alone does make you unforgettable. Predictability does spark desire. Complacency doesn't inspire respect. You got comfortable thinking being available was enough, but availability does make you valuable, it makes you replaceable. The lie you've been telling yourself is that effort guarantees loyalty. You remember the things you did, the sacrifices you made, the ways you showed up. You keep a scoreboard in your head, tallying all the reasons she should still be invested. But she isn't keeping score. She's not interested in the past. She's living in the present, and in the present she feels nothing pulling her closer to you. That's why her silence cuts so deeply. It reveals the gap between what you think you deserve and what you've actually earned. Here's a shocking truth. Her silence is freedom. She's showing you exactly where you stand without playing games, without feeding you false hope, without dragging you along. You want words because words can soften the blow. But she is giving you silence because silence cannot be twisted. Silence is pure, unfiltered honesty. And deep down, you know what it means. You just don't want to accept it. Instead, you chase. You send another text, you reach out again, you try to prove you are still worth her time. But every time you do, you shrink. Every time you beg for her attention, you lose more of your dignity. And here, as the brutal irony, the more you chase, the less she respects you. The more you cling, the easier it becomes for her to ignore you. You make yourself smaller with every attempt to pull her back, until you are invisible in her eyes. So stop calling it cruelty. Stop painting yourself as the victim of her silence. The real cruelty is the way you've neglected your own growth, your own power, your own presence. You've been so obsessed with being wanted that you forgot to be undeniable. And now that she's ignoring you, you are forced to confront that reality. It hurts, yes, but pain is the only teacher some men will ever listen to. Here is the shift you need to make. Stop seeing her silence as punishment and start seeing it as feedback. Brutal, yes, but priceless. Feedback that says you've been coasting, that you've been soft, that you've been relying on her recognition instead of building your own. And if you're willing to face it, that feedback can break the cycle you've been stuck in for years. Because once you stop needing her attention to feel alive, you finally start living. Her ignoring you isn't the end. It's the beginning. The wake-up call that forces you to stop confusing attention with connection, to stop mistaking comfort for security, and to finally step into the version of yourself that can be overlooked. If you keep crying over her silence, you stay small. If you let her silence sharpen you, you become someone who no one dares to ignore. Harsh truth. Distance is not punishment, it is clarity. It feels like rejection, it feels like betrayal, but what it really is revelation. You see, punishment implies she's trying to teach you a lesson, that she is playing some game to get a reaction out of you. That's not what this is. When she distances herself, she's not teaching you, she's showing you. She's showing you what she no longer feels, what she no longer values, what she no longer respects. And she does need to wrap it up in explanations or apologies. Silence and distance are clean, they are undeniable. They say everything without saying anything at all. Your mistake is believing that you can talk her out of her distance. You believe that if you just explain enough, if you send the right message, if you beg just a little louder, you can convince her to close the gap. But distance is not a debate. Distance is a declaration. When she pulls back, she is telling you, without words, that her energy no longer flows in your direction. And instead of hearing that, instead of facing it, you fight against it with desperate gestures that only expose your weakness. Here's what you need to understand. People don't distance themselves from strength. They distance themselves from what feels weak, uninspiring, stagnant. When someone truly respects you, when they feel your presence elevating their life, ignoring you does even feel like an option. But when they sense comfort turning into complacency, when they see consistency turning into predictability, when they no longer feel inspired by who you are, silence becomes easy. Her distance isn't about punishing you, it is about protecting herself from what she no longer feels. Think about how often you've confused stability with security. You thought just being there was enough. You thought showing up was the same as standing out. But stability without growth becomes boredom. Comfort without passion becomes routine. And routine kills desire faster than mistakes ever could. That's why her silence cuts so deep. It's not just the loss of her voice. It's the loss of the illusion you built in your mind. The illusion that everything was fine, that your presence was unshakable, that she needed you as much as you needed her. But distance shatters illusion. It forces you to see the cracks you've ignored, the effort you stopped making, the edge you lost along the way. And the worst part, you can't argue with it. You can negotiate with silence. You can convince distance to shrink just because you want it to. The only thing you can do is look in the mirror and ask the question most men run from. Why was my presence so easy to step away from? That is the question that burns. That's the question that destroys your ego. Because deep down you know the answer. You weren't unforgettable. You weren't irreplaceable. You did maintain the strength, the presence, the drive that makes someone feel like walking away would be impossible. You allowed yourself to become ordinary in her eyes, and ordinary is always replaceable. That is not punishment, that is reality. Here is another brutal truth. Her silence is not the problem. Your reaction to it is. When you collapse, when you crawl, when you make her distance the center of your identity, you confirm exactly why she pulled away in the first place. You show her that without her attention, you crumble. And nothing kills respect faster than seeing someone lose themselves when they are ignored. The more you beg, the more you chase, the more you spiral, the easier it becomes for her to keep ignoring you. You turn her silence into a stage where you perform your weakness, and in doing so you erase any chance of regaining respect. But here is where the shift happens. When you stop seeing distance as punishment, you start seeing it as information. Information about how she feels. Information about where you stand. Information about the holes in your character that need fixing. That's not a curse, it, a gift. It, a raw, painful gift, but one that can change everything if you are willing to use it. The silence becomes clarity. The distance becomes feedback. And that feedback is brutal, yes, but it's also priceless, because it gives you a choice. Stay weak, stay needy, keep chasing, and keep getting ignored. Or face the truth, rebuild yourself, and become the kind of man who commands respect without having to beg for it. When you stop begging for closeness, and start demanding more from yourself, everything shifts. Her silence no longer defines you, it refines you. Her distance no longer destroys you, it exposes you. And exposure is the first step to transformation. Because once you see yourself clearly, you can no longer hide behind excuses. You can no longer pretend you don't know why she pulled away. You have to face it, and in facing it, you finally get the chance to become someone who cannot be pushed aside, ignored, or forgotten. You want answers, but here is one you don't like. If she is ignoring you, because she does feel urgency to keep you. That stings more than anything you've been telling yourself, doesn't it? You replay every memory, you cling to every moment you thought mattered. But here is the harsh truth: you mattered less to her than you believed. If she's not reaching out, if she's not fighting for your presence, it's because she does see the cost of losing you. And that's not her fault, that's yours. You built comfort and mistook it for security. You thought being consistent, being available, being there was enough. But comfort without fire rots. Predictability without passion dies. You stopped being a challenge. You stopped being someone who stretched her, inspired her, demanded her respect. And instead you became easy. You became familiar. And familiar is the first step toward being forgotten. Here is the part no one tells you. Love is maintained by routine. It is kept alive by simply showing up. Desire, respect, connection, they require growth. They require energy. They require a sense of urgency. When she ignores you, what she's really saying is that you no longer spark that urgency in her. She doesn't feel compelled to respond. She doesn't feel pulled toward you. She feels free to drift away. And that freedom is proof of your fading impact. You can keep telling yourself stories to soften the blow. That she's just stressed. That she just needs time. That she still cares deep down. But those are lies you use to protect your ego. If someone values you, silence feels impossible. If someone truly wants you, they don't gamble with your absence. The fact that she can choose silence shows exactly how she measures your importance in her life. And you don't want to admit it, but that measurement hurts. Stop romanticizing the idea that effort from yesterday guarantees loyalty today. Effort has an expiration date. Presence loses value if it stops evolving. What you gave her last year, last month, even last week, doesn't matter anymore. The only thing that matters is how she feels now, in this moment, And in this moment, her silence screams that what you're offering isn't enough to hold her attention. This is where most men fail. They take her silence as an invitation to beg. They double down on attention, they plead, they flood her with reminders of how much they care. But what they don't realize is that desperation makes them smaller. Every attempt to force a response only proves why she pulled away in the first place. Respect does vanish because of her silence. Respect vanishes because of your reaction to it. When you crumble, when you chase, when you turn into a shadow of yourself just to get her to notice, you confirm that you were never as strong as you pretended to be. Here is a shocking truth you don't want to face. Comfort does to make you secure, it makes you replaceable. When she feels that you stopped pushing yourself, when she senses that you rely on her attention to fuel your confidence, you become easy to walk away from. And once she learns she can ignore you without consequences, the silence will only grow louder. So what's the takeaway? Her ignoring you is the tragedy you think it is. A signal. A harsh, unforgiving signal that you've been coasting, that you've let yourself believe being good enough would carry the weight of desire and respect, that you've been living off yesterday's effort instead of proving yourself today. Her silence is about her needing space, as about you needing to wake up. And that wake-up call hurts. It should hurt, because pain is the only thing strong enough to strip away your excuses. If it did, burn, you'd stay the same. You'd keep confusing comfort with value. You'd keep believing presence without passion was enough. Her silence is forcing you to face reality. And reality does care about your feelings. Reality only cares about results. So stop crying over her distance. Stop asking, why won't she talk to me? And start asking, why did I make myself unforgettable? Because the second you understand that, you stop blaming her for pulling away and start fixing the cracks that made it so easy for her to leave. Distance is not the end, it's the test. Most men fail it because they don't even recognize it as a test. They see silence and panic. They see distance and collapse. They let emotions take over. And in the rush of desperation, they destroy whatever dignity they had left. But here's the raw truth. When someone pulls back, that moment reveals your true strength or your true weakness. It shows whether you are built on solid ground or fragile validation. And right now, every move you make is an answer to the question you don't want to face. Who are you without her attention? Do you crumble? Do you crawl? Do you make her silence the centerpiece of your life, obsessing over every second she does reply? Do you shrink into the role of a beggar, hoping scraps of her attention will be thrown your way? If that's your reaction, you've already lost. Because no one respects a man who can stand alone. No one is drawn to a man who falls apart when ignored. And no woman feels desire for a man whose entire identity shatters the moment she steps back. Or do you rise? Do you let the silence expose the cracks and decide to rebuild stronger? Do you take the sting of being ignored and use it as fuel instead of letting it paralyze you? Because that is the choice staring you in the face. Her distance does destroy you, it reveals you. And once you see what you really made of, you either retreat into weakness or rise into strength. Here's the harsh truth that most men never learn. A man's worth is not measured by who texts him back. It's not measured by who validates him, who acknowledges him, who chooses to stay. A man's worth is measured by the life he builds when no one is clapping. By the focus he keeps when no one is watching. By the standards he holds for himself when there is no audience to impress. If your worth collapses in silence, then it was never real in the first place. It was borrowed. Borrowed from her attention. Borrowed from her presence. Borrowed from her energy. And borrowed worth always gets repossessed. This test is not about her. It never was. It's about you. It's about whether you can face yourself without needing someone else to validate what you see. It's about whether you can take pain and convert it into progress. Because let's be brutally honest, most men won. Most men will drown in overthinking, chase harder, beg louder, and destroy the last shred of respect they had left. They'll trade their pride for the illusion of closeness. And in doing so, they'll confirm why she pulled away in the first place. But you don't have to be most men. You don't have to fail the test. You can choose to turn the silence into leverage. You can use it to sharpen your focus, to reclaim your edge, to remind yourself that you were born with value before anyone ever validated you. That's the mindset shift. Stop making her silence the story of your life. Make it the spark that reignites you. Every man faces this test at some point, the moment when someone's absence forces him to see whether his foundation is built on neediness or independence, desperation or discipline, weakness or strength. And make no mistake, your reaction to her silence isn't about getting her back. It is about getting yourself back. Because if you can stand strong in silence, you were never standing at all. So ask yourself this: will her distance expose you, or will it elevate you? Will you drown in the noise of your own desperation, or will you rise in the power of your own silence? Because that is the test. And whether you realize it or not, you're already answering it. Here is another brutal truth: the more you chase, the more invisible you become. You think your persistence shows loyalty. You think sending one more message, making one more call, reminding her of how much you care, will prove your value. But it does It does the opposite. Every act of chasing strips away another layer of respect. Every desperate move makes you smaller in her eyes. What you believe is persistence, she sees as weakness. What you think is proof of love, she sees as proof that you can stand without her. And nothing kills attraction. Nothing kills respect faster than a man who has no control over his own neediness. The more you beg, the less she respects you. Begging is the language of men who have already lost. You think you are fighting for her, but really you are fighting against yourself. Because begging does rebuild desire. Begging does reignite respect. Begging only exposes how fragile you really are. A man who begs is a man who has surrendered his power, who has traded his dignity for scraps of attention. And once you give up your dignity, you've given up everything. She might pity you, but pity is not love. She might feel sorry for you, but sympathy is not respect. And you cannot build a relationship on pity. Respect does vanish because she pulled away. Respect vanishes because of how you respond to it. That's what you don't want to admit. You had a chance, even in her silence, to hold yourself with strength, to stand firm, to let her see that your life does not revolve around her approval. But instead, you collapsed. You let your emotions lead. You chased. You clung. You exposed that without her acknowledgement, you lose yourself. That's why she stopped respecting you, not because of the silence itself, but because of the way you crumbled under it. Think about this. Strong men get ignored too. Powerful men get left unread. Respected men face rejection. The difference is in how they respond. Weak men panic, strong men stay centered. Weak men lose their identity when someone withdraws. Strong men hold their ground because their identity was never for sale in the first place. If you can't hold your value in silence, you never had real value, you just borrowed it from her attention. Here's the part you've been running from. Chasing does win her back. It pushes her further. The more you make her silence the center of your universe, the more you prove she was right to pull away. And deep down, you know this. Every unanswered message stings because it shows you how small you've become. Every ignored attempt burns because it reminds you that she has no urgency to respond. And instead of regaining respect, you lose more of it with each act of desperation. You need to stop asking yourself how to make her reply and start asking yourself why you became the kind of man who can be ignored in the first place. That is the real question. That, as the brutal mirror silence is forcing you to look into. You don't like the reflection, so you keep distracting yourself with false hope. But the truth is simple. If she respected you, she would ignore you. If she admired you, she would make you chase. And if she desired you, silence would even exist. The harsh reality is this. Every message you send from desperation is a reminder of your weakness. Every attempt to force a connection only pushes her further away. And every second you spend chasing her attention is a second you not build yourself into the man who commands respect without asking for it. So stop begging, stop chasing, stop proving her right. Because until you learn to hold your ground in silence, you will always be forgettable in her eyes. Respect is not lost in the distance, it's lost in your reaction to it. And if your reaction is desperation, you've already answered the question of why she pulled away. A woman does ignore strength. She does distance herself from a man who commands respect with his presence, who holds himself with power, who refuses to shrink, but she will ignore weakness every single time. Weakness repels. Hesitation repels. complacency repels. And once she senses that in you, once she sees you've lost the edge that once drew her in, silence becomes effortless. You think she, punishing you, but she is, she's filtering you out. Her silence is a filter, separating men who stand tall from men who crumble. And right now, you are learning which side of that filter you fall on. She does ignore strength, but she ignores hesitation. Every time you second-guess yourself, every time you put her on a pedestal, every time you let fear dictate your actions, you shrink in her eyes. She sees that your confidence is fragile, built on her approval instead of your own conviction. And fragile confidence collapses under silence. She does need to attack you. She does need to argue with you. She does need to explain herself. All she has to do is withdraw. And suddenly you reveal everything she suspected, that your strength was an act, that your confidence was borrowed, that your identity depends on her attention. She doesn't ignore a man who keeps growing. She ignores complacency. You thought the work was over once she was in your life. You thought showing up was the victory. But relationships are maintained by coasting. They were fueled by growth, by ambition, by the fire that says, I will not stand still. The second you slowed down, the second you lost your hunger, you became ordinary in her eyes. And ordinary is always replaceable. And here, as the part that most men refuse to hear, she does ignore because she stopped caring overnight. She ignores because you stopped being the man she could ignore. Somewhere along the way, you lost your discipline. You lost your drive. You lost the spark that once made you magnetic, and she felt it. She felt the difference between the man she once admired and the man you became. That's why she's silent, not because she's cruel, but because she no longer feels the pull that once kept her close. Her silence is a filter, and if you fail the test, you are not cut out for the next chapter. That's the truth you've been avoiding. You want to believe silence is temporary. You want to believe it as a phase. But silence is a verdict. It's a measure of whether you've grown or decayed, whether you've stayed sharp or dulled into comfort. And right now you are facing the reality that you let yourself slip. But here's the harsh gift hidden in her silence. It shows you where you really stand. It exposes the version of yourself that you've been pretending doesn't exist. The weak, hesitant, complacent version you buried under excuses. And once it is exposed, you have no choice but to face it. That is why silence hurts so much, because it strips away the lies and leaves you with the raw truth of who you are. If you pass the filter, you don't need to beg, you don't need to chase, you don't need to demand attention. Respect is drawn to strength. Desire is drawn to ambition. Attention is drawn to presence. But if you fail the filter, you vanish. She ignores you not out of malice, but out of instinct. She ignores what does to inspire her. She ignores what doesn't challenge her. She ignores what doesn't feel alive. So stop blaming her silence. Stop calling her cold. Stop pretending she owes you more. She owes you nothing. The filter is fair. The filter is brutal. And the filter never lies. Either you rise above it, or you disappear because of it. Her silence is not rejection, it's revelation. It reveals whether you are the man who can command respect without asking for it, or the man who crumbles the moment approval is taken away. And if her silence erased you, you have your answer. So what? The shift. You stop seeing her silence as a loss, and you start seeing it as an opportunity. Every part of you wants to label this as rejection, as the end, as proof that you weren't enough. But what if it isn't then? What if it's the beginning? What if her distance isn't there to break you, but to expose you? Because once you stop looking at silence as something happening to you, start looking at it as something happening for you, everything changes. Her silence is a mirror. It reflects back the man you've become when no one is watching. That is why it cuts so deep. It shows you how much you've relied on her attention to validate your existence. You don't like sitting in that silence because it forces you to face yourself, stripped of distraction. You can, tied behind her replies, her presence, her energy, you are left with only you. And maybe that is the real reason it hurts, not because she's ignoring you, but because you finally realizing how much you've ignored yourself. This is the mindset shift. Stop treating silence like a wound and start treating it like a teacher. It's not here to destroy you. It's here to instruct you. It showing you the gaps in your character, the weaknesses in your foundation, the complacency you allowed to grow. Instead of begging her to return, instead of drowning in self-pity, Use the silence as fuel. Use it as the wake-up call to sharpen yourself, to rebuild your focus, to reclaim your drive. Because if you can stand tall in silence, you will never stand tall in life. You keep asking yourself, what do I do now? The answer is simple. Stop waiting for her to fill the void and start filling it yourself. Silence is an opportunity to get real with your discipline, your ambition, your growth. An opportunity to shift from dependency to independence, from weakness to strength. Because if you need her presence to feel whole, then you were never whole to begin with. And that's the truth you've been avoiding. Here's the brutal reality. If she can walk away, let her. If she can ignore you, let her. If she can create distance, let her. Not because you don't care, not because you want to play games, but because her silence frees you to face what really matters yourself. The moment you stop fighting her silence and start fighting your own stagnation, you become dangerous. You become the kind of man who does beg for respect but demands it through the way he lives. This shift changes everything. Instead of seeing silence as emptiness, you see it as space. Space to grow. Space to focus. Space to rediscover who you are when you're not clinging to someone else's attention. And that space is priceless. Because in that space, you learn that your strength does come from her. It comes from you. Your worth does come from being chosen. It comes from choosing yourself. Your power does come from being noticed. It comes from being undeniable, whether anyone notices or not. If you embrace this, her silence becomes irrelevant. Whether she returns or disappears no longer defines you. You stop living for her reaction, and you start living for your own evolution. And that is the point of the silence, to reveal whether you'll keep collapsing into dependency or whether you'll finally rise into independence. The shift is simple but powerful. Stop asking, why is she ignoring me? And start asking, why did I ignore myself for so long? Because once you answer that, you'll stop fearing her distance. You'll stop craving her validation. You'll stop shrinking in her absence. Instead, you'll grow into someone who can be ignored, not by her, not by anyone. That's the opportunity silence gives you. To build yourself into the kind of man whose presence is so powerful, whose focus is so sharp, whose energy is so undeniable that silence from others no longer rattles him. And when you reach that point, whether she returns or stays gone won't even matter. Because you'll finally see what this was all about. It was never about her silence. It was about your awakening. Here's where the excuses end. You've spent enough time drowning in questions, replaying the silence, begging for answers you'll never get. None of that matters anymore. What matters now is what you do next. Because if you walk away from this unchanged, if you let her silence break you instead of build you, then you've wasted the most brutal gift life just handed you. And yes, it's a gift. Her silence is the fire that burned down your illusions. Now it's on you to decide whether you rise from the ashes stronger, or whether you stay buried under the weight of your own weakness. Stop thinking she owes you closure. Stop waiting for her to explain herself. Stop putting your life on hold for someone who already made it clear she can live without you. That's your wake-up call. That's the line in the sand. If she can pull away, let her. If she can ignore you, let her. If she can vanish, let her. Because the truth is, no one who truly values you disappears. No one who truly respects you ignores your existence. No one who truly wants you makes you beg for their attention. So you have two choices. You either keep chasing what slipped through your fingers, proving to yourself and to her that you don't have the strength to stand on your own. Or you take this pain, this silence, this rejection, and you use it as fuel. You stop waiting and you start building. You stop chasing and you start leading. You stop begging for respect and you start earning it through the way you carry yourself. This is the point where men are separated from boys. Boys crumble when they are ignored. Boys panic when they were left alone. Boys beg for attention because they have no identity without it. Men, on the other hand, use that silence to sharpen themselves. Men take the rejection and turn it into discipline. Men turn distance into drive. Men walk away with their head held high, knowing that their worth was never tied to anyone else's approval. And that is the challenge staring you in the face right now. Will what? Oh, let this break you? Or will you let this forge you? Will you keep chasing someone who already written you off? Or will you step into the kind of strength that makes you impossible to write off again? This is not about her anymore. This is about you. About the man you decide to become when no one else clapping, when no one else texting back, when no one is there to feed your ego. Understand this. Silence does. Define you, your response does. And if your response is weakness, then you've already lost. But if your response is strength, if your response is discipline, if your response is growth, then you already won, regardless of what she does. Because the real victory is not getting her back. The real victory is getting yourself back. So here's the call to action. Stop checking your phone. Stop replaying the silence. Stop handing over your power. Take all that energy you've wasted chasing her and invest it into building yourself into a man who cannot be ignored. Sharpen your mind. Strengthen your body. Discipline your habits. Raise your standards. Become so focused, so driven, so unshakable, that whether she comes back or not no longer matters, because here is the truth you can run from. The man who cannot stand alone will never stand tall with anyone. You've been given the test. You've been given the silence. Now your move. And if you choose to stay weak, if you choose to keep begging, if you choose to let this destroy you, then you already proven her right. But if you rise, if you reclaim yourself, if you build a life so powerful that silence does scare you any more, then you win every time. So stop waiting. Stop begging. Stop shrinking. Rise. Because if her silence broke you, you were never strong to begin with. And if it forged you, then her silence was the best thing that ever happened to you. The choice is yours.